At my husband's family barbecue, his sister joked, "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice." Everyone laughed but me. I raised my hot dog and said, "Challenge accepted." That night, I left without a word. A year later, they finally learned who really disappeared. My name is Vanessa, and for 7 years, I was Gregory Caldwell's wife. But on a sunny afternoon last summer, during his family's annual barbecue, I ceased to exist in their world. It was his sister Amanda who delivered the final, casual blow that shattered the fragile illusion I had been living. "If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice," she said with a smirk. The table, a picturesque scene of suburban privilege, erupted in laughter. My husband, Gregory, chuckled along with them. And in that moment, something inside me, something that had been bending for 7 long years, finally snapped. I didn't cry. I didn't protest. I simply raised my half-eaten hot dog in a mock toast, locked eyes with Amanda, and said, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, "Challenge accepted." I moved out that night, cut all contact, and vanished from their lives. A year later, the question remained, who had truly forgotten whom? I met Gregory during our final year at university. I was buried in student debt, working part-time at a gritty, independent coffee shop to pay my tuition for graphic design. He was a business major, his education and life fully funded by his parents. Our connection was instant, a classic whirlwind romance. He found me intriguing. "A breath of fresh air," he said. So different from the polished, preordained women in his social circle. Within 3 months, we were inseparable. By graduation, he proposed with a diamond ring that cost more than my entire student loan. I was 24, dazzled by his charm, his confidence, and the seemingly perfect world he offered. The Caldwells were everything my own family wasn't. Where my childhood was filled with the warm, chaotic love of a single mother working 2 jobs, theirs was a landscape of cool, curated affluence. Richard, the patriarch, had built a marketing empire from scratch, a self-made man who now reveled in his maidman status. Patricia, his wife, was the architect of their social standing, managing their lives with the strategic precision of a 5-star general, her kindness always feeling like a performance for an unseen audience. Amanda, Gregory's older sister, was a carbon copy of her father, ambitious, sharp-tongued, and already a junior executive at the family firm. Michael, the younger brother, played the part of the lovable rebel, yet still landed a cushy job at his uncle's investment firm. My first visit to their sprawling colonial home felt like stepping onto a movie set where I hadn't learned the lines. The class differences were a subtle, persistent hum beneath the surface of every interaction. Patricia would compliment my freelance design work as if it were a charming hobby, a quaint little diversion. "How creative you are, dear," she'd say, her eyes already scanning the room for someone more important. Richard would patiently explain basic business concepts to me at dinner, despite my having run a successful freelance operation for 3 years before meeting Gregory. And Amanda was the master of the delicate incision. She would helpfully correct my pronunciation of a wine variety or a designer's name, her smile a thin veneer over her condescension. She was the gatekeeper of Caldwell acceptability, and I never received more than a temporary pass. "They mean well," Gregory would insist whenever I gingerly brought up these microaggressions. "That's just how they are. Amanda's trying to help you fit in." But Amanda's help felt less like assistance and more like a slow-acting poison. At our wedding, her maid of honor speech was a highlight reel of Gregory's past relationships. When we bought our first home, she questioned whether the neighborhood was appropriate for a Caldwell. When I landed a major client, she mused aloud if they'd hired me as a favor to her father. Yet I tried. God, how I tried. I volunteered for Patricia's charity galas, smiling until my cheeks ached. I referred clients to Richard's firm. I learned their birthdays, their preferences, their endless stream of inside jokes. I slowly sanded down my own edges, dressing differently, speaking differently, swallowing my working-class pride when conversations glided effortlessly into topics of European vacations and private boarding schools. For the first few years, I clung to my design business, a small piece of my former identity. But then Gregory was offered a significant promotion, contingent on extensive travel. The decision was unilateral, unspoken but clear. My career would scale back to support his. My client list dwindled. My world shrank to the walls of our perfectly decorated home and the judgmental orbit of his family. The vibrant, ambitious woman Gregory had married was fading, replaced by a placid, anxious shadow. The breaking point, though I didn't recognize it as such at the time, was the miscarriage. At 11 weeks, I lost the baby. The physical pain was a searing agony, but the emotional isolation was worse. Gregory was in Chicago for a conference. He offered to come home, but his tone was so thick with unspoken relief when I said I could manage that I immediately regretted my bravery. Patricia sent an extravagant bouquet of white lilies with a note that read, "Perhaps it's for the best. One must be truly settled before starting a family." Amanda suggested, with faux concern, that the stress of trying to maintain your little business might have been a factor. It was my sister, Olivia, who saved me. She drove for hours, arriving with a suitcase and a cooler full of homemade soup. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat with me through the tear-soaked nights, her silent presence a stark contrast to the Caldwell's clinical distance. That crack in my foundation widened, but I dutifully packed it with more denial, more determination to make this gilded cage feel like a home. By the time the annual Caldwell summer barbecue arrived, I was a ghost in my own life. My design work was mechanical, my friendships had atrophied, and my marriage felt like a role I was performing. Still, a fragile, foolish hope persisted. Maybe this year will be different, I thought. Maybe this year, I'll finally belong. The barbecue was a meticulously orchestrated display of Caldwell prominence. Patricia had been planning for weeks. Richard was unveiling a new, ludicrously expensive imported smoker. The guest list was a who's who of business associates and social contacts. It was a stage, and I was perpetually in the wings. That morning, I spent 3 hours making my grandmother's strawberry shortcake, the one dessert that had ever earned me a moment of genuine praise from Patricia. Gregory was preoccupied with calls about his upcoming trip to Tokyo. As we left, he hurried me out the door. "Remember," he said, "Dad's unveiling the new smoker. Try to act impressed, even if you don't get why it's a big deal." I nodded, clutching the dessert carrier, my new sundress, bought specifically to match Patricia's casual elegance directive, already feeling like a costume. The Caldwell estate was buzzing. Caterers wove through clusters of guests. Richard held court by the grill, the center of a circle of admiring men. Patricia's laugh, like the tinkle of fine crystal, floated across the manicured lawn. Finally, Amanda called out, spotting us. She air-kissed Gregory, then gave me a swift, assessing glance. "Vanessa, that dress is so cheerful. The kitchen's getting crowded, but I'm sure you can find somewhere to put your contribution." She swept Gregory away before I could reply. I stood alone for a moment, a satellite untethered from its planet. In the kitchen, Patricia was directing staff with military efficiency. "Oh, Vanessa dear," she said, not unkindly, just distractedly. "You didn't need to bring anything. The patisserie is handling desserts." She gestured vaguely to a crowded pantry shelf. "But how thoughtful. Perhaps put it there for now." I placed my shortcake on the shelf, next to a store-bought pie, and as I left, I heard Patricia instruct a server to make sure Amanda's authentic tiramisu has center stage on the dessert table. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in social invisibility. I was a ghost of the feast. Conversations I joined would stall or be interrupted. I offered to help, but was told everything was under control. I watched Michael's wife, Charlotte, a pediatric surgeon married into the family for only 2 years, being warmly embraced, included in stories she couldn't possibly remember, her achievements celebrated. The contrast was a physical ache. Lunch was served. I found myself seated between Gregory's nearly deaf Uncle Frank and an empty chair reserved for Amanda. Gregory sat across from me, already deep in conversation with his father about Japanese business etiquette. When Amanda arrived, she commanded the table's attention instantly with a story about a celebrity sighting. During a lull, I saw my opening, a tiny crack in the conversation where I could insert myself. "I just finished a branding project for that new bakery downtown," I offered, my voice sounding too bright, too eager. "They're having their grand opening next weekend." Amanda's eyes narrowed a fraction. "How nice. Is that the place with the rather tacky neon sign? I drove past it yesterday. The signage is actually vintage-inspired, I explained, my heart beginning to pound. The owners wanted to honor the building's history as one of the first. If you disappear tomorrow, Amanda interrupted with a theatrical sigh, waving her fork dismissively, no one would even notice. That's how boring this conversation is. The table erupted. Patricia tittered behind her linen napkin. Richard guffawed. Uncle Frank, misunderstanding, chuckled along. And Gregory, my husband of 7 years, let out a soft chuckle and reached for his craft beer. The sound of their laughter was a physical blow, a wave of ice water that shocked my system. I felt hyper-visible in my humiliation, yet completely invisible in my personhood. My face burned, but my hands turned to ice. 7 years of slights, condescension, and erosion crystallized in that single, perfect moment of cruelty. I did not cry. I did not storm away. I would not give them the satisfaction of a scene. Instead, I slowly raised my humble hot dog. I met Amanda's smug gaze across the table, and with a clarity that cut through the laughter, I said, "Challenge accepted." A confused silence fell for a beat. Amanda's smile flickered. Gregory looked between us, bewildered. Then Patricia, the master of social redirection, chirped, "Who's ready for Richard to carve the brisket?" And the moment was swept away, another insignificant ripple in the Caldwell pond. But for me, everything had changed. The rest of the afternoon, I was an anthropologist, calmly observing the species in its natural habitat. I watched their assured movements, their unshakable sense of belonging. And I listened, finally, to the voice I had been silencing for years. It was no longer a whisper. It was a roar. "You deserve better than this." The car ride home was a silent chasm. Gregory scrolled through emails about his Tokyo trip. "The client wants to meet at some legendary sushi place. Sounds incredible," he read aloud. I stared out the window, my mind a whirlwind of cold, methodical planning. As we pulled into our driveway, he finally noticed my silence. "Everything okay? You've been off since lunch." I took a slow breath. Amanda's joke. About me disappearing. "Did you think that was funny?" He sighed, unbuckling his seatbelt with a sharp click. "Don't start with this again, Vanessa. Amanda was just being Amanda. You know how she gets at these things. It was a joke." "You laughed," I said, my voice flat. "It was a joke," he repeated, his tone fraying with irritation. "Not everything needs to be analyzed to death." He got out of the car, slamming the door, effectively ending the conversation. That was the final confirmation I needed. He would never see it. He was a willing citizen of their world, and I would always be an immigrant begging for a visa. That night, as Gregory slept the untroubled sleep of the truly self-assured, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who could command a room with a presentation, who debated passionately with clients, whose laughter was genuine and unforced. That woman was still in there, buried under layers of Caldwell-approved compromise. At 2 a.m., I slipped out of bed and into my home office. The blue light of my laptop illuminated my determined face. I began my research with the focus of a general planning a campaign. Bank accounts, apartment listings in Seattle, where Olivia lived, the logistics of moving a life. By dawn, a plan, terrifying and exhilarating, was born. Gregory left for a morning golf game with his father, kissing my cheek absently. The moment his car disappeared down the street, I sprang into action. My first call was to Jessica, my college roommate, a bond that had somehow survived my social isolation. "I need a massive favor," I said, my voice trembling only slightly. "Name it," she replied without a heartbeat of hesitation. "I'm leaving Gregory. Today. Can you come help me pack?" 2 hours later, she was at my door, armed with coffee, packing boxes, and a ferocious loyalty that brought tears to my eyes for the first time. We worked with efficient silence, a 2-woman extraction team. We prioritized everything. My design equipment, personal documents, the few pieces of jewelry that held sentimental, not monetary, value, the photo albums of my family. "I can store anything that doesn't fit at my place," Jessica said, carefully wrapping a framed picture of my mother and me. While she packed my physical life, I executed the digital and financial separation. I transferred exactly half of our joint savings into my personal account. I calculated my share of the upcoming mortgage and utility bills and set up payments. It was clean, clinical and fair. By mid-afternoon, my car was packed with the distilled essence of who I was and who I wanted to be again. Jessica hugged me fiercely. Call me when you're settled. And Vanessa, I'm so proud of you. Alone in the echoing silence of the house I had shared with Gregory for 5 years, I sat at the kitchen island and wrote him a letter. It was not long, not emotional. I stated that I needed time and space to reevaluate our marriage, that I had taken only what was mine, and that I required no contact. I did not tell him where I was going. As a final act, I slipped the heavy, perfect diamond of my wedding ring from my finger. It felt like removing a shackle. I placed it on top of the letter, and next to it, on a separate, crisp, white note card, I wrote Amanda's words verbatim, adding the date and location like a clinical footnote. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. Amanda Caldwell, Caldwell Family Barbecue. I took one last look at our wedding photo in the hall. Our faces, so full of hope and blind love, seemed to belong to different people. Goodbye, I whispered to the ghost of the woman I had been, and walked out the door without looking back. The drive was a meditation in liberation. With every mile that stretched between me and the Caldwells, the constriction in my chest loosened. By the time I crossed the state line into Washington, I was breathing deeply, freely, for the first time in years. Seattle greeted me with a soft, persistent rain, a baptism into my new life. Olivia had found me a tiny, month-to-month studio apartment in her neighborhood. It had creaking floors, a view of a brick wall, and a kitchenette the size of a Caldwell closet. To me, it was a palace. It was mine. The first week was a blur of practicalities. A new bank account, a new phone with a Seattle area code, updated profiles on freelance platforms. I curated my portfolio, ruthlessly cutting out any work connected to Gregory's network. I was building a foundation from scratch. Gregory's messages evolved on schedule, confusion, irritation, performative concern, and finally anger. Where are you? This is ridiculous. Your mother is worried. You're being incredibly selfish. I have a Tokyo trip in 3 days. Not once did he mention Amanda's joke. Not once did he express understanding. I sent a brief, reassuring text to my mother and turned my phone off for a week. I found a therapist, Dr. Lewis, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense approach. What Amanda said at the barbecue, she observed in our third session, that wasn't the cause. It was the catalyst. The last straw. Yes, I agreed. Tell me about the first straw, she prompted. And so I did. I unpacked 7 years of inventory. The achievements minimized, the opinions dismissed, the identity slowly hollowed out, with Gregory as a benignly negligent accomplice. Professionally, I started small. I took on uninspiring but paying jobs designing e-books and social media templates. It was grueling, but it rebuilt my confidence one completed project at a time. My breakthrough came from a local coffee shop. I was struck by a beautiful, hand-painted mural on its wall. The barista noticed my admiration. The owner commissioned it from a local artist. She's actually looking for someone to redesign our menus. An hour later, I was sitting across from Eleanor, the owner. She had silver-streaked hair, a direct gaze, and no time for pretense. I don't care about your resume, she said, waving away my tablet. Show me your personal work. The stuff you do, because you can't not do it. Tentatively, I opened a folder I hadn't touched in years. Wild, experimental, deeply personal designs. Eleanor studied them in silence. You've been hiding, she finally said. These are good. Really good. But this isn't recent work. No, I admitted. I haven't done work like this in years. Why not? The question was a gut punch. The story tumbled out, the sublimation of my style, the surrender of my voice. Eleanor listened, then nodded. You're hired for the menu project. On one condition. You do one personal piece, something purely your own, every week. Bring it when we meet. I don't care if it's good. I care that you're finding your voice again. Eleanor became my mentor and my anchor. She connected me with a network of local business owners. My work became more creative, more me. I rented a desk in a cooperative creative studio, surrounding myself with artists and entrepreneurs who valued my input. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings moved forward with sterile efficiency. Gregory's initial resistance gave way to weary resignation. His only personal communication came with the finalized papers. I still don't understand, but I won't fight you anymore. The night I received those papers, I stood before my bathroom mirror and cut my hair, shearing off the long, graceful style Gregory had always loved into a sharp, modern bob. The woman staring back was thinner, older, but her eyes held a clarity I hadn't seen in a decade. The email arrived exactly 52 weeks after the barbecue. It was from Westwood Creative, a reputable agency. The subject line was professional, designer sought for national campaign. Then I read the body of the email. The client was Sheffield Consumer Brands, a subsidiary of Caldwell Marketing Group. The coincidence was too precise. This was no accident. After a day of deliberation, I called Thomas, the creative director. The project was legitimate, substantial, and the budget was transformative for my small business. I asked careful questions. He gave straightforward answers, with no hint of ulterior motive. I accepted. If this was a trap, I would walk into it with my eyes open and my armor on. For 3 weeks, it was purely professional. My designs were well received. Then came the invitation, the annual Marketing Innovation Gala, where Sheffield would unveil the rebrand. My attendance, as lead designer, was expected. The Caldwells would be there. It was inevitable. The old Vanessa would have crumbled. The new one booked a session with her stylist. I would attend, not as Gregory's wife, but as Vanessa Pierce, designer. My armor would be an emerald green jumpsuit, elegant and unmistakably confident. The gala was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. I was deep in conversation with a magazine editor when I felt the atmospheric shift that announced the Caldwell's arrival. I didn't turn. I finished my point, then excused myself to get a drink. Our eyes met across the room, mine calm, Gregory's wide with shock. I held his gaze for a 3 count, then turned back to the bartender. The encounters came in waves. Richard first, with corporate blandishment. Vanessa, quite a surprise. I'm the lead designer for Sheffield's rebrand, Richard. He was momentarily thrown. I hadn't made the connection. The preliminary testing is quite positive, I said, as if to any other executive. Then Amanda, intercepting me with Thomas. Vanessa, no one mentioned you were involved. I'm working with Westwood Creative, I said, and introduced her to Thomas, who smoothly extracted us. My presentation was a triumph. I spoke with authority, my designs projected on a massive screen. From the stage, I saw them. Patricia's neutral mask, Richard's analytical nods, Amanda's whispered comments, and Gregory's unwavering, intense stare. Afterward, surrounded by well-wishers, Gregory approached. You look well, he said. Thank you. I didn't know you were in Seattle. That was intentional. Your presentation. You always were talented. I always am talented, I corrected gently. He looked down, then met my eyes with a new directness. I've thought a lot about that barbecue, about everything. I didn't understand then. This past year has been clarifying. He admitted he missed me, his voice soft with regret. I felt no vengeance, only a quiet certainty. I need to join my team, I said. We agreed to coffee the next day. The final confrontation was with Amanda, in a quiet moment. Did you take this project knowing it was connected to us? She demanded. No. I found out after. And you didn't recuse yourself? Why would I? I'm excellent at my job, Amanda. Your family benefiting is incidental. She was silent, then offered something unexpected. Your presentation, it was genuinely good work. Thank you, I said and meant it. At our coffee meeting, Gregory was different. Softer. He'd been in therapy. I didn't stand up for you, he admitted. Not against Amanda, not against my family. I failed you. He asked if there was a chance for us. I looked at the man I had once loved so completely. I think we both needed to become different people, I said gently. And I like who I'm becoming. He accepted it with a grace I didn't know he possessed. We parted with a hug that felt like a true goodbye. 1 month later, I sat with Eleanor in her coffee shop, the Seattle rain a comforting soundtrack. The campaign launches next week, she said. You must feel satisfied. I do, I said. Thomas says the early response is fantastic. And the Caldwell connection? It's professionally cordial. Richard's director reached out about future work. Through proper channels. Eleanor smiled. From family outcast to sought-after professional. Life's symmetries are interesting. She was right. The Sheffield project catapulted my career. I bought a small house near the water, my own sanctuary, purchased with my own earnings. I was dating, gardening, building a life that was authentically, joyfully mine. Weeks later, I ran into Amanda at a farmer's market. She was pregnant, her silhouette softer. We exchanged stilted pleasantries before she said, with uncharacteristic vulnerability, "I've been thinking about what you said about contexts. I'm discovering something similar with motherhood. I don't want my child to ever feel like they need to disappear to be seen." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement, a moment of shared humanity. "That's a good place to start," I replied. Walking home, I realized the profound irony of Amanda's challenge. By disappearing from their world, I had made myself visible to my own. The opposite of being unseen isn't just being noticed. It's becoming so fully present in your own life that you no longer require an audience. The woman who raised a hot dog in a Defiant toast a year ago is gone. The woman I am now has reclaimed her name, her voice, and her life. The challenge was not just accepted, it was transformed into the greatest gift I have ever given myself. I had vanished to find myself, and in the end, I was the one who had truly reappeared.